From this point upward, it's referred to as the upper court in physiognomy. The 2 points at the start of the eyebrows in face reading are called the glabella, or more poetically, the seal path. But for simplicity, we can just call them the inner edges of the eyebrows. Now, just below the glabella and between the eyes, if you draw a line from the inner corners of both eyes, right here is a spot called the, or mountain root. This is the lowest part of the nose and marks the foundation of the nose. Why mountain root? Because the nose is like a mountain growing outward from this base. If the mountain root is firm and well developed, it's considered auspicious. If it's flat or sunken, that's less favorable. What's an extremely flat nose? It's when tears can naturally flow from this area across the face. That's what's meant by a flat nose. Got it? Then, moving upward along the nose, we have these represent the upper nasal bridge, symbolizing vitality and longevity. At the tip of the nose is the nasal tip. The larger and fuller the nasal tip, the more benevolent and kind-hearted the person is said to be. Think of Santa Claus. His nose tip is round and bright like a cherry tomato. So, if one day you want your child to grow up to be kind-hearted, give their nose a gentle pinch now and then. 10 pinches a day, and eventually their nose will become round and full. By the age of 20, they'll look just like Santa Claus, so generous they might never get married, because they're too nice. Now from the glabella upwards to the top of the forehead, this whole region is called the upper court. It contains the brain, so in face reading, it represents intellect and wisdom. The upper court is directed upward, symbolizing things gifted by heaven and inheritance from one's parents. This corresponds to the life stage between 15 and 30 years old, when we're still living largely under the influence of what we've been given, not yet fully directing our own path. In physiognomy, life is said to truly begin at age 30. Why? Think about it. Doesn't that make sense? Why did Confucius say, "At 30, I stood firm"? Because it's at 30 that we begin to stand on our own feet. And to be honest, based on my own reflections, I've found that to be true. In our 20s, we're not fully established yet. When you're in your 20s, you're simply diving into life to explore, to gain experience. Sure, some people may get lucky and succeed early, but the truth is, at that stage, you haven't truly established your identity yet. You're still quite naive. Even getting married in your 20s is often done without full awareness. It's more like going along with what feels right in the moment, without deep clarity. But from the age of 30 onward, that's when you begin to truly become yourself. That's when your real identity starts to form, your character, your essence, your direction in life. This is the point where the journey becomes yours, where your decisions, your values, and your actions start aligning with who you really are. From 30 on, you begin to walk your own path with greater awareness. In fact, to be more precise, that shift begins around age 28. That's the turning point where the foundation of your adult self starts to take shape. You see it clearly, don't you? So, if someone has a rounded forehead, or really any rounded feature, it tends to reflect qualities of support, softness, and adaptability. These traits are often associated with people who prefer to stay in the background, who are nurturing, patient, and more inclined to support rather than lead. In contrast, angular or square features usually indicate a pioneering spirit, strength, and decisiveness. These are the traits of those who naturally step forward, take initiative, and aren't afraid to be at the front. Supportive traits often lean slightly toward the back, while pioneering traits lean slightly toward the front, both in posture and in approach to life. Exactly. When facial features are square or rugged, they carry a yang quality, strong, assertive, and forward-moving. That's why people with square foreheads often possess a pioneering spirit. They're bold, decisive, and naturally suited for leadership or frontline roles. On the other hand, a rounded forehead reflects a deeper, more introspective way of thinking. These individuals tend to be better in supportive or strategic roles, where careful analysis and behind-the-scenes planning are needed. So, when someone has a square forehead and a strong, resonant voice, it's a classic sign of a frontline leader, someone built for action, for challenge, and for leading the charge. So, is the traditional strategist, the fan-waving advisor, someone who leads the charge in battle, or someone who works behind the scenes? Their support roles, of course. It's the frontline generals, the tiger generals, who are meant to fight and lead in direct conflict. That's why, by simply observing a person's forehead, we can already get a sense of their natural tendencies, whether they're more of a strategist, who thinks deeply and supports from behind, or a warrior who takes bold action at the front lines. A protruding forehead is often a sign of excess brain power, a surplus of mental energy. And yes, that usually means the person is highly intelligent. But when that intelligence is excessive and uncontrolled, it can lead to overthinking, mental wandering, and being easily distracted by unnecessary thoughts. Only those with excess brain energy, who are trained in meditation from an early age, can rise above it. Otherwise, when the mind is overloaded and left untrained, it will inevitably drift, thinking about everything and nothing at once. And when the mind starts overthinking, it leads to overanalyzing. Too much analysis without grounding eventually turns into mental theater. You begin playing out endless scenarios in your head, and it becomes exhausting. A protruding forehead often indicates a strong imagination, a mind full of ideas and images. But a sloped forehead, one that angles slightly backward, reflects a practical mindset, a grounded person focused on real-world results. A square forehead belongs to someone who takes action, direct, decisive, and ready to move forward. Meanwhile, a rounded forehead suggests a supportive character, someone who naturally steps back, prefers to observe, and works better behind the scenes. An M-shaped forehead is also considered a rounded type forehead. Let me show you what an M-shaped forehead looks like. Here's an example. It's not very distinct yet, but you can see this part curves upward, while these two sides slope downward. That's what forms the M shape. If the hairline at these corners dips a bit lower, it becomes a more clearly defined M. Can you visualize it? It's actually quite common. Many people have M-shaped foreheads. Look here. This is an example of an M-shaped forehead. Even the famous musician Trin Kong Son had an M-shaped forehead. See it? Now take a closer look. His forehead is quite high, but also a bit more square-shaped, with a slight protrusion. And notice the wrinkles. There are many fine lines across his forehead. In face reading, wrinkles often represent inner thoughts and emotional depth. Things a person carries inside but doesn't easily share with others. They reflect a mind full of reflections, of stories left unspoken. Now ask yourself this. Do you think a man like him, someone who came up with Einstein's theory of relativity, had anyone to truly confide in? Highly unlikely. He was deeply lonely. A true eagle in terms of intellect, soaring high above but flying alone. For nearly 20 years he carried that theory inside him, unable to fully explain it to anyone, unable to connect with anyone on that level. And when he finally presented it to the world, it took years of resistance before the world even began to understand and accept it. Look at all those wrinkles on his face and that gaze. There's something almost divine about it. Doesn't it feel like Einstein's eyes are staring off into another world? He's sitting right here, but it's as if his mind is drifting through galaxies, lost in some far-off place. You feel it too, right? So if a man like that gets married, Would his wife be well taken care of? No, quite the opposite. She'd be the one taking care of him. Otherwise, he'd probably forget to eat, wear the same clothes for a whole month without even noticing. There's even a famous story about this. One day, Einstein was scheduled to present his theory of relativity at a university. Around 6,000 people were expected to attend, including professors and PhDs from all over. But he completely forgot about the event. He just went about his usual experiments in the lab. Later, his assistant burst in saying, "Professor, it's 9 o'clock. People have been waiting half an hour for you." They found him buried in the lab, completely immersed in his experiments. The assistant said, "Professor, the lecture hall is full. Everyone's waiting." So Einstein rushed out just like that, still wearing his white lab coat, the same clothes he wore while experimenting. On his feet, one black sock and one white. And off he went straight to the stage, dressed like that, ready to lecture thousands of scholars from all over. One of the event staff stopped him. "Professor, you can't go on stage looking like that. If you want to change your coat, fine, but at least fix your socks. One white, one black, it just looks ridiculous. Go back and change." So Einstein went back to the lab, opened his wardrobe, stared inside for a moment, then closed it and came right back. They asked, "Why didn't you change your socks?" And he said, "There's only one pair, one white, one black. What would be the point of changing?" "Why didn't you change your socks?" Einstein replied, "There's only one pair, one black, one white. What would be the point of changing?" See, he didn't change, and really, why would he? If you told him to go back and switch them, it'd still be one white and one black. So what's the use? That's Einstein for you. From that story alone, you can tell. His level of focus was off the charts, so intense that everything outside his area of concentration simply faded away. That's why he seemed absent-minded. But if you asked him something basic, like, "What's 5 times 6? He probably wouldn't know right away. Mental math? He might not be able to do it. He'd need a calculator. The point is, those child prodigies in Vietnam nowadays, so fast with numbers, tapping away and calculating faster than any computer, they wouldn't even qualify to work for Einstein. Why? Because to Einstein, the brain wasn't meant for simple multiplication, like 5 times 6 equals 30. That's not what the brain is for. That's what calculators are for. That kind of task belongs to machines. Human beings are meant for something else, something deeper. That's why learning fast and learning deeply are two entirely different things. The same goes for thinking fast and thinking deeply. They're not the same at all. So take a look. This man clearly had deep thoughts. That's why the songs of Trinh Quang Son are so beautiful. Especially his lyrics. They're full of philosophy, rich with reflection. People with a philosophical nature often have high foreheads. And Trinh Quang Son's songs, yes, they're philosophical, but they also carry a deep sadness, don't they? And when there's sadness in the mind, what kind of aura do you think radiates from that person, joy or sorrow? Clearly, sorrow. When someone carries sadness in their thoughts, it shows. Their aura turns somber, almost without them realizing. And when joy fills their mind, it shines through just as clearly. If their thoughts are drifting somewhere far away, their gaze follows. It becomes distant too. Quiet, soft, but never quite here. His wife, dressed in a beautiful new outfit, walks back and forth in front of him, trying to catch his attention. He looks up, still lost in thought, and says, "Which planet just appeared?" He's thinking about galaxies again. She says, "I just bought this dress. Don't you notice anything?" He replies, "Time is relative. It stretches, it compresses. How could I possibly know?" That's the theory of relativity in action. Now, let's take a look at the forehead. Steve Jobs had an M-shaped forehead, a rounded type. But what about his eyebrows? They belonged to a warrior. And his eyes, were they scholarly or martial? Martial too. His gaze carried a kind of force, a sharp intensity. He was incredibly intelligent, no doubt, but there was an edge to his features, a commanding energy. Not gentle, not soft. He didn't give off a kind-hearted vibe. His eyebrows clearly reflected a warrior's traits. His nose? A heaven-connecting nose, tall, strong, reaching up to match the height of his forehead. In face reading, that signifies exceptional intelligence, strong will, and extraordinary drive. But look closely. The tip of his nose is small and pointed, and that tells another story. A sharp nose suggests a calculating mind. It has a touch of the hawk, even a hint of the classic witch-like shape, sharp, clever, strategic. He had a thick beard, fierce eyebrows, and powerful eyes, that kind of presence. But in the end, what truly brought him down was not cancer, it was anger. He died from his temper, from holding too much heat in the heart. Treating the cancer was pointless in his case. If he had cooled his inner fire, perhaps the illness would have gone away on its own. What kind of cancer could possibly heal when someone stays angry all the time, still filing lawsuits year after year, stewing in conflict? That kind of illness isn't of the body, it's of the spirit. And so, when he finally collapsed, it took just a month. He passed quickly. August 24th, he was diagnosed as critical. By October 5th, he was gone. In the West, they're experts at treating symptoms, but not the root. When someone's diagnosed with cancer, they go straight to surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. But no one looks deeper. No one asks what lies underneath the illness. But if you pay close attention, you'll see this man carried a tremendous amount of suppressed anger. Even his staff said it. A perfectionist, sensitive, creative, but quick to anger, ambitious, obsessed with control, decisive but harsh, cold. A tangle of irritability and emotional emptiness. He was a deeply conflicted individual. Warm and kind at times, but also strangely irritable. So what kind of meditation did he study back when he went to India? It certainly wasn't Vipassana, that much is clear. Because if he had practiced Vipassana from a young age, left college, and spent 3 years in India truly learning it, then by now he would have learned to master his own mind. But he didn't. He never really gained control over his inner world. So, whatever form of meditation he studied, it wasn't Vipassana. Anyone who looks closely at his life can see that right away. Now look at Bill Gates. He also has a tall, straight nose, what face readers call a heaven-connecting nose, a sign of high intelligence. But look at his overall face. There's a clear softness, a kindness that stands out. Bill Gates doesn't radiate authority the way the other man did. He never used his power to push others down. What you see instead is generosity. That's why Bill Gates supports so many philanthropic efforts. And Microsoft, it's one of the least litigious tech companies out there. They rarely sue anyone. Even when people in Vietnam pirate his software, he lets it slide. Let's be honest, you all owe Bill Gates money. Add up Microsoft Office and Windows, and that's at least $300 per person. And most of you have been borrowing that software for years. Every time a new version comes out, you update for free, maybe another $150 or $200. He still says nothing. Do you think companies like Microsoft don't know you're using cracked versions? Of course they know. They can see your IP. It says you're in Vietnam, but they let it go. If they wanted to, they could block you in 30 seconds, but they don't.